least in the John Deere study we did, is that there wasn't any single SME that scored well on all of those capabilities. There was always an area where they could improve. There was always an area where they were weak. But they relished the opportunity to understand what they needed to do to become a critical strategic supplier for that MNE. And I think that's the key, is to to do that assessment, to map out your supply chain, figure out which suppliers are critical, which ones have a high potential of becoming a key supplier, and then providing them with the resources, the education, the development, in some cases, investing in that capability. And I think there's a lot of precedent for this in the automotive sector, particularly in companies like Honda and Toyota. And I've spent a lot of time with Honda. And Honda, they believe in having a local supply base everywhere in the world. They had a factory in Swindon. They had one in Ohio. They had one in Thailand. And everywhere they went, they established and developed a local supply base. And they believe in that locality because of the, not just from a working capital perspective, there's less lead time, but they can build a relationship. They can continuously improve the supplier. They give them, basically a lifetime contract. Once you're a supplier to Honda, you're a supplier for life. And they believe in that continuous improvement. You never stop getting better. And I think those are the kinds of relationships that I think are really productive, and they're stable, and they can last a very long time. And I think that's where the industry needs to go overall, to really rethink some of those relationships.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah. And I think that's something that we're trying to, in our organization, are trying to do, is to try to look at how we can create those sort of boilerplate templates that will assist SMEs, and then how to make it easier for them to demonstrate compliance, because compliance is an expensive process for a lot of SMEs, and demonstrating compliance to a wide variety of different requirements means that they have to pick and choose potentially, because they can't meet all of those costs. So, we're looking ahead to ensure that we can have those solutions accessible and available for SMEs, to then help them in terms of looking at greater diversity opportunities for them, in terms of looking at how they can supply into a sort of greater number of channels going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the harmonization of contracts, of factory audits, of financial audits, if we can harmonize and standardize some of those vehicles, so a supplier doesn't have to go through a 2 or 3 day audit for every customer, because that takes up resources, it takes up time. And what we found, at least in the apparel sector, is often the requirements coming out of that audit that they need to comply are often conflicting between different companies. Yes. So they're trying to figure out which customer is more important, which audit do we have to follow? And it can be really confusing and tiresome, and they get what's called audit fatigue, where they just, they give up, and they say it's impossible to pass any of these bloody audits.
Impossible and impossible. You can't, and that's a big barrier for a lot of businesses. So it's something I think can be a really practical approach for then working with these smaller businesses going forward. Once we look to be able to restart sort of global economies post this situation. And I guess this sort of the final question then is, well, what skill set is required beyond this? Because we've never existed in an environment like this before for businesses, and we were already kind of emerging slowly a little bit into this with the trade wars going on. So geopolitically, we'd already emerged in terms of how that impacts businesses. Then we have had climate disasters. I know that personally, obviously coming and being here in Australia during the bushfire crisis that has disrupted our economy and supply chains. So we've got geopolitical instability, we've got climate instability, we now have a health pandemic, but also we've got the fact that also in some of these sectors and for businesses, we've got the threat of automation. automation, AI, and what does that do for impacting businesses as well? And all of these things are either emerging, and we didn't encounter this in a lifetime before, or there's things on the horizons that move very, very quickly now, and it changes. It's going to change how we do business. So, what do you think we perhaps can do in this downtime to think about this year to prepare for what the skills of the future are going to be needed within businesses?
Yeah, well, I think we're, as I said earlier, we're really we are in the middle of a crisis, which is unprecedented in mercantile history and in really in the history of the world. And I think, the reason COVID spread so quickly is we do live in an era of global travel. And, it was a lot of, very wealthy Chinese people that traveled to Europe, and then some very wealthy Europeans traveled to New York. And that's how these pandemics spread and it wasn't spread, the 1918 Spanish flu was very localized because people just didn't travel as much as they did now. But be that as it may, we have to plan for a recovery because recoveries will come. They always do come. They can come more slowly. They can come more quickly, but they will come. And I think in the 2008 situation, we had a government stimulus that allowed the markets to bounce back in 6 months. I think this recovery is going to take more like 18 months to 2 years to really get back to the early, 2019 levels of growth that we were at, or even early 2020 in January before this hit. So I think, now is the time for people to really reflect on what went wrong, what is going wrong. Let's enhance the power of our sourcing network, and let's fix the problems with our upstream problems that exist around single sourcing or high risk suppliers. And I think in many cases we were forced into these relationships either because our specifications were too narrow, our materials forced us to buy from certain suppliers, the scopes of work were too limited. So we need to have more flexibility in our requirements, in our RFIs or RFPs, to de-risk our global supply chains and to facilitate cost reduction. And I think, we also need to blow up, I think, our total landed cost assumptions, because what we were looking at in terms of landed cost in 2019 is not applicable in 2020. Everything has changed overnight. And I think the assumptions that we use that these stable, logistics channels are going to continue. I think there's going to be a lot of businesses that aren't going to go around. Those that don't have 6 or 12 months of cash sitting around are likely going to go down. So I think we have to think about diversity in supply in the second and third tier. We have to think more about, how we, as you pointed out, how we have to rethink contracts. We have to get away from indemnification, limits of liability, talk about risk, and talk about how to deal with uncertainty and how to deal with unexpected events. And I think we have to think about, as you said, force majeure, and how do we deal with the challenges around that. We're going to continue to see, circumstances which are unavoidable, unforeseeable, unsurmountable. I think, we went for so long without a crisis that we really became used to, telling ourselves that everything was okay and nothing bad could ever happen. I think now we have a great opportunity to expand our role in crisis management, to think about what we need to do in terms of resiliency, how to react to unexpected events, and I think also to improve the dialogue that we have, improve our communication, and improve our relationships with our key partners, because ultimately we're all in this together.
Absolutely. And I think that that's a very good final statement to end in it, because we are all of us are in this together. It's this knows no borders. So I would like to thank Robert. I'm doing a virtual thank you here. Thank you so much for your fantastic presentation and also all of the insights that we have had during that final discussion. If you do want to follow up the conversation with Dr. Handfield, then his email address has been up there on the screen. Or if you have issues that you as a business are dealing with in terms of supply chain issues, then you can obviously reach out to the GTPA, and we are here to be able to provide some support. Our session next week is going to be covering on how to manage your remote workforce, ensuring that they are productive and not watching Netflix all day, because we need to ensure that we are utilizing our resources as much as possible. So I hope that you join us for that session next week. And until then, I would like to say, please stay safe and try to remain as positive as you can, because we're all in this together. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you.